Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. The Outdoor Adventure Series celebrates individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration of the great outdoors. Our guest today is Bridget Butler. Bridget is the bird diva and the owner of Bird Diva Consulting. She is a naturalist that helps people connect with the place that they live through building a relationship with birds and the land. Bridget, it is a pleasure to have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Thank you.
Yeah, Howard, it's so great to be here with you today.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, in my usual spirit of full disclosure, I met Bridget, as so many of our other guests that are coming on the podcast, at the Outdoor Writers Association of America's annual conference in Vermont. And what's really cool about Bridget is, well, two things, really, a lot of things, actually. One, I got to go out on a little excursion with her. We had a group event. And two, she gets to live in Vermont, this beautiful, beautiful place, very magical. So Bridget, again, it's a fantastic to have you on the show. And I just want to thank you for the time you spent. People like me who grew up in urban settings get out and explore the great outdoors in Vermont. So thank you.
You're welcome. That was really a special week because here in Vermont, it was just switching over to fall foliage. So you really got the best of autumn in northern Vermont for sure.
I couldn't believe when I woke up Monday morning that even though it was overcast, these trees were just like presenting themselves to me. And I was like, I just had it like, I'm a morning guy and I love to have my morning coffee. And here in Vegas, or the suburb of Vegas, I sit out or I stand at the door. It's usually open and I look at the sunrise. And now we have a lot of clear skies, but every once in a while, there's really some phenomenal cloud paintings that I call it, and just kind of absorbing that moment. And with Vermont, that Monday morning, it was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. And, you know, how do you get bored with it? I mean, it's, you get this every day, this beautiful, beautiful state of yours.
No, I don't think I get bored with it because it's a little bit different each year and you really never know how it's going to come through. You know, for example, fall this year, I think everybody was worried that it wasn't going to pop the way that it ended up, popping, which was just phenomenal. And I feel like I'm lucky that I can still see that each year. And maybe that's because I already have a strong connection with the land and with nature, that I'm always curious and always trying to see and notice something new. And when I focus in that way, I can see something new every year.
Fantastic. And as you highlighted just now, this connection with land and with nature, I would love if you could paint for us a little bit of your background and how you came to be known as the Bird Diva. And so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. I grew up in central New York, which is not too far from where I live right now in northern Vermont. And my sister and I have a younger sister. She and I were outdoor kids. So, you got home from school and you were outside for as long as you could. My dad hunted deer. He was a deer hunter. He was a bird hunter, I should say. He still is. And so that was a big part of our family culture. Gardening was a big part of our family culture as well. We had huge gardens out back. So I think, my family growing up modeled being very connected with the land and with the outdoors in all of those different ways. When I grew up through high school and started thinking about going to college, I also had experiences with other family members in other parts of New England, including Cape Cod. And so each summer we would spend time with my grandmother who lived out there, and my interest grew in marine biology. And so that's actually what I studied in college. I went to University of New Hampshire. I have a degree in marine and freshwater biology, but I discovered pretty quickly that I wasn't very good on boats. So I thought I wanted to be like Jacques Cousteau kind of thing and like study all kinds of different. I was really into invertebrates like sea urchins and sea anemones and sea slugs and stuff like that. But I didn't do very well on boats. I got really, I got really sick whenever I went out on a research vessel. And so my focus kind of shifted from there to, how can I enjoy the ocean from the land? So out of school, I gained jobs at a number of different nature centers, science centers that were coastal. And that's where my relationship with the Audubon Society started, was with New Hampshire Audubon at the Seacoast Science Center, which is on Odiorn Point in New Hampshire. And I bounced around from different nature centers for a while. I also felt like I was getting too serious too fast in my 20s. And I had a great job at the Wellfleet Bay Wildlife Sanctuary out on Cape Cod, and I was doing educational programs and outreach for kids and adults. And it was really wonderful, but I missed the snow.
Oh,
I
boy.
missed winter, right? And the change of seasons there is very different than the change of seasons in northern New England. And so I quit that job to become a ski bum. And that's how I ended up in Vermont, specifically where we were for the Outdoor Writers Association conference at Jay Peak. I heard it got the most snow in the Northeast. And so I was like, well, this is where I want to be. And that's how I ended up in Vermont. And so I did the ski bum thing for a while, and then decided I needed to get a better job that was year round, and found my way back to Audubon again.
Those darn JOBs.
I know, right? Can't I just figure out how to play? While I was at Jay Peak, I still did a lot of natural history kind of focused stuff where, you're skiing people in the woods there. I led snowshoe tours at night and taught people about, all the wildlife there, tracking and trees and all kinds of things like that. But that was really speaking to me, and I had to find my way back into that. And that helping people connect with nature was very, very strong for me. So I ended up at Audubon, Vermont, and joined their education staff there, and was there for about 8 years. And as I grew into my work there, I became their conservation education specialist that was focused on helping landowners specifically connect with birds on their property and learn how to manage their land in a way that was good for songbirds. So Audubon really shifted into this place of working with foresters and landowners and loggers even, to teach them about silvicultural practices that could be done in a way that would help breeding birds stay on the landscape. And that was I think that was a big shift for me, is figuring out how to communicate with some of these non-traditional audiences, like loggers, like foresters, and find a way to deliver a conservation message that made people, adults especially, feel like they were taking action that was going to be super helpful to birds.
I'm curious, what type of language or insights that you share with the foresters, the landowners, the loggers I would imagine you're not there to change their mind, but you're aware, but you're there to help provide awareness to them about we can coexist together. There's a business need, which is what you have. There's also a conservation need, which we need. How did you go about communicating that message? I'm curious.
Yeah, that is a great question, because I think it wasn't about communicating. It was really about listening and developing relationships. And that takes a lot of time, right? So loggers and foresters trusting a group of people that could be lumped and stereotyped as tree huggers, right? You're going to come in and you're going to tell me that I can't cut trees down and make the living the way that I know how to make a living. And that was not Audubon's approach at all. What we found was people, everybody has a bird story. Everybody has a bird story. It doesn't matter who they are. In my work over the years, and this is like, gosh, it's so hard to like look at this now, but it's like 20 years of working in the conservation field. Is it doesn't matter who you're talking to, somebody's got a bird story, whether it's like a crow or an owl or, you know, a tiny sparrow that they encountered. I remember sitting at a table with a bunch of loggers. It was like the Vermont Woodlands Association meeting, and I was there as a representative to Audubon to talk about this forest bird initiative where we're trying to get landowners and foresters and loggers thinking in this different way. And I was like young and female in a very male dominated, you know, field, both in terms of conservation and the forestry field. And I sat next to this guy who was old enough to be my dad, and he and I started talking, and he started telling this beautiful story about this little bird that he would encounter all the time on all of his job sites. So he's telling me about it, and it's small and it's brown and it's like a chickadee size, and it does this really beautiful, and he whistles it for me, and he whistles. Poor Sam, Peabody, Peabody, Peabody. And I was like, that's white-throated sparrow. And it just happened to be one of the focal species for this work. And so, you know, it really taught me to, again, slow down, right? We had a mission, a message, all of this that we really wanted to get out there, but it really was about slowing down, building a relationship with people, listening to their stories, and then finding where those things overlapped between the message that we wanted to get out there to folks and the stories and the needs and values that those foresters and loggers and landowners had.
I love the connection that you made with him. I would imagine in his mind, the bird is something that he looks forward to, or, you know, every day on a work site. And it just, you know, has to go about his job, but this bird is giving him some joy. And now you recognizing that. And by the way, for our listeners, Bridget, as you notice, is just did a few whistles, or a whistle. We're going to get her to do a few more. I think that must have been an incredible connection with this individual, that you not only could give him back what this bird was, but also provide the, you know, the mnemonics, the whistling of what it sounded like.
And then that opened the door for us to be able to have a conversation about management practices, right? And, you know, logging at different times of year, right? So that relationship started to grow and build from there. And that's what Audubon Vermont needed to do, was build trust within that community first, build those relationships, and then start to work on how we were all going to make a change together. And it's become a really amazing, robust program that's being copied by Audubon groups all over the country now. So very successful, just fascinating program to be on the you know, the ground floor of, as it started in the Northeast.
Very good. And I was going to ask you, how extensible was this program? Are other states picking that up? So it sounds like it's a great model.
Yeah, after I left there, what was great is they got funding, and they were able to put funding together to, you know, print resources to basically train state foresters in this kind of different approach to silviculture and management. It was very grounded in science, both, you know, from the forestry aspect and from the bird conservation aspect. And they did a really great job of pulling partners in. So again, that trust was built. They put out some really amazing products that are still available as well right now, and have a number of landowners across the state that are engaged in this type of work.
Very nice. When did you begin to contemplate moving from having the traditional job, a very interesting job, I will add, but the traditional job of research, speaking, presenting, investigating programs, things like that, writing about them, to beginning to contemplate, I think there's a career shift in my not too distant future. When did that idea start to percolate for you?
Yeah, I think being, and I worked for a number of different Audubons through my career. I worked for, Maine Audubon and New Hampshire Audubon and Massachusetts Audubon, and then Audubon Vermont. And, the kind of wheelhouses for that kind of outreach was either through the conservation lens or through an education lens. And in terms of, we bird to understand the birds that are present on the landscape for the purpose of science. And I think what I started to struggle with is that I wanted to bird in another way. And it wasn't really something that I saw represented in the birding community, something that was less focused on having a list of birds, less focused on how many different species can I identify and just like babble on about, less about traveling to see unique species. I wanted this deeper connection with place. And Northern Vermont has a really big place in my heart. When I landed here, I think it was maybe that, maybe it was like the central New York connection too. The woodlands were very similar to where I grew up in Vermont, this love of the mountains and the snow, the cyclical nature of seasons. I wasn't seeing that. So maybe it was like more of a spiritual thing. I don't know. And I always joke around about this, that I'm like, I'm not super spiritual or religious. I'm not into meditation or yoga, but the path I seem to be down right now when it comes to birding and connecting with the land kind of has little bits and traces of all of that. So I kind of bounced around after working at Audubon Vermont and wasn't finding what I wanted. And then I also, had a shift in my life where I got married and I had kids, and all of that changed how much time I had to connect with the land, go out in nature and enjoy things. And what slowly began to happen was I started to figure out what was important to me in terms of how I was connecting with birds and through birds. And it was really those joyful, slow moments where I got to peek into a little bit more about what that bird's daily life was like. Like, what are they doing other than, you start asking questions other than what is that? Why is it doing that? Why is it here? Why is it not here? Where can I find it? Why am I here where I thought I could find it and I can't find it? So yeah, I shifted into this different perspective and I called it slow birding. And having 3 kids and needing to be present for them, I had to make a really hard decision to walk away from a job at the time that was not giving me the flexibility that I needed with our kiddos. And that provided me the opportunity to go out on my own and really explore birding the way I wanted to explore it and ultimately build a business around it.
Very nice. And I love the fact that you were taking in the signs that there's a need, a passion building within you that needs to be filled, and it's separate than this traditional 9 to 5-ish, job. And you also brought up, and it was a great segue to this idea of slow birding. I remember the stereotypical birder, and I can picture it. I know it exists here in the US, but I picture it in these old movies in the UK where this guy in the mustache and the field jacket and the hat, or these little gray-haired ladies, they're going on bird watching adventures, and they're like bird chickadees themselves. They're going looking for one area, then they're moving somewhere else and moving somewhere else. And this idea of slow birding, and you were chatting about that when we were on our excursion at the OWA conference, just slowing down, taking in the moment. And so
Mm.
talk to us more about what is slow birding and how does one begin to learn about it, embrace it, and have it. And I think there's also some very important health related factors here, because we're not feeling like we're rushed. We're giving the mind, body, and soul just kind of a chance to slow down a little bit.
Yeah. You know, so traditional birding to me seems very driven by ego, and that can be a good thing and it can be a not so great thing. So there's this segment of the birding community that is driven by, I have a lot of species on my bird list. You know, every weekend I'm going out and looking for new things. I'm one of the first people that gets to see whatever is arriving back, all of that. So there's this almost competitive nature to it. And I really started to think about, is there some of the questions I started to ask, do I bird differently because I'm female? Do I bird differently because I value the land differently? And that really led me to do a lot of different research into birding and gender and what's the history of birding and where did it come from? And I started to unearth all these different things that I was like, oh my gosh, there were women especially that we don't talk about, who were some of the founding like mothers of ornithology that birded in this way, because in this era that they came up in the Victorian era, their whole place was to be at home. But the experiences that they had birding close to home was very deep and rich in behavior, in what their life cycle was like, which was not happening at the time with the rest of the scientific community when it came to birding. So I felt validated that what I was feeling and what I was experiencing and how I was finding joy and connecting with birds in birding right outside my door, in not traveling far to see birds, in finding the miraculous in the common, right? Like maybe I only have chickadees in my yard. How can I shift how I'm thinking and looking at chickadees so that I'm seeing the new in them each time they arrive in my yard? So what I did is I kind of embraced this approach that is within the environmental ed community called sit spots. And the idea is that you identify a place that's close to home that you can go easily and sit and spend time in nature. Now I live in a Vermont urban, that is, Vermont urban environment, a little different than Vegas urban.
Yes.
But I don't doubt that like you could do this in Vegas too, right? Like you step outside, there's a spot that you go to have coffee, right? And you gaze across the landscape. You can slow bird from there as well. So it's become more of a practice than, gosh, I don't know, like hobby practice. This is where I start to think, oh, it gets into this meditation a little bit differently. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to spend time in this one place. And I'm really going to build some skills around observing that are deeper than for the purpose of identification. It's more like, again, like you're building a relationship with those birds that are common to you, that you can see all the time. I call them our usual suspects. And if you can get to like maybe a handful, like 5 usual suspects that you see on a daily basis, those are great birds to build a foundation for knowing and getting to know other birds wherever you go. So I built a program that basically uses the sit spot method and some other ways of looking and listening to birds that went beyond what I had experienced when I was learning and coming up in the birding community. And for me, gosh, all these personal things happen too. Like I remember one of the first times I ever sat in a workshop for 45 minutes on a sit spot. This was with the White Pine program, does something called Bird Language. And this is a book that the whole premise is taking ideas from how birds vocalize and how that tells us what's happening on the landscape. So it's very based in primitive hunting cultures and what can bird alarms tell us about what's happening on the land. So I went to one of these workshops hoping to find what I wanted. I didn't. I found bits and pieces, but I didn't find what I really needed. But I found the sit spot method, and I found this way of being in touch with the land on a regular basis that really changed birding for me. So now I offer programs and courses and do workshops and things like that that get people doing this same sort of thing. And sometimes it becomes very personal. So the first time I sat for 45 minutes was after I had become a mom of 3 young children. I had 3 kids that were under 3. I got to go to this workshop for 4 days. It was like super break, but it was also really stressful because I was away from our young kiddos. And all I had to do this first time out was sit for 45 minutes and notice birds. And I came back and I just broke down crying because it was the first time I didn't have to think about anything else except being in that moment with birds and allowing me to call me into attention. And that's all that I needed to do. And it was a big, huge release. So now I've come to recognize, not only through my own experiences, but the people that have participated in my classes have said things to me like, you've given me permission to let go of having to go someplace to get birds and feel validated as a birder. You've given me a wellness practice to juggle my life and let go of some of the stress. I had another woman who said to me, I broke my hip and my arm in a weird accident and I can't go birding. But I took your slow birding class and all I needed to do was step outside and sit and be with the birds that are right outside my door. And she was like, that allowed me to relax and take the time to allow her body to heal so she could be mobile and bird again as well. So it's been like a crazy evolution. I don't think I could have plotted this path for myself, but I love it. I'm loving every step of it.
That's fantastic. And something comes to mind, especially as you're sharing the story about the woman with their hip. I would imagine that slow birding is a great outlet for individuals with a disability of sort. Perhaps, it'd be nice to see the bird, but I can see people who are sight disadvantaged, or, they listen, they're very sharp listening skills, or, folks that can't get around or they're in a wheelchair. And how has slow birding been a resource for them? So that would be question number 1, Bridget. But also, do you find that there are urban areas where individuals with some type of disability can go and still enjoy this experience of slow birding?
Yeah, I didn't realize that slow birding made birding more accessible when I started this. I did realize that there were people that wanted to bird in this way. One of the things that happens to me all the time is like people will find out that this is what I do for work, and they'll start a story about a bird, but they'll preface it by saying, I'm not a birder, but da 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 da. And they go into this amazing detailed story about something they saw. And I was like, wait, you just rambled off all these great details. You are joyful and passionate and excited to tell me this story. So I think you're a birder, right? So a lot of people perceive birders in this way, right? Like you were talking about, the guy with the hat and the mustache and the khakis and they're right. I don't know, maybe they're writing stuff down like crazy. So we have this perception of what a birder is. And what I discovered is that there are a lot of people out there that are distancing themselves from being a part of the birding community because there's not a sense of belonging. Like they don't see themselves within the birding community, but they do appreciate and love birds and they want to know more. So that was, I think, the first thing that happened is I started getting feedback from people that were like, oh my gosh, I've never been able to bird in this way. So that was really good. And then I started getting stories like that story from my now friend who injured herself and felt like she couldn't bird how she birded before, but found this very freeing for her. And as I started to meet more people through this work, that just kept coming up over and over again. Oh my gosh, I can do this. Or my kid has, I do a slow birding with kids, and, you know, families with kids with ADD or ADHD, where like my kid's a different kid. I'm asking them to listen to birds outside, and she is a different kid when we try some of these things that you've suggested. So that again caused me to do a little bit more research and dig a little bit deeper and fine tune what I offered to folks, so that, right, I'm letting them know this is a more accessible approach and might really work well for you. Along the same lines, when you bring up urban areas, so remember back when we all had to like be on lockdown, right? And you couldn't go anywhere. And for me, what happened was my birding, where I went birding, shrunk even more. So I had my sit spot in my backyard, but at the same time, I really needed to get out of the yard and out of the house and have some space. And I started walking in the city that I live in St. Albans City, and finding different patches, like small little block patches of woodland or shrub scrubland or whatever. And so I think that there is nature wherever we are. Again, we just have to slow down and look for it. Often I think we think of ourselves as separate from nature instead of a part of nature. And granted, we've done a lot to change the landscape and, you know, pave everything and put big buildings up, but nature still has a way of inserting itself in there. You know, we have stories of red-tailed hawks and peregrines nesting on buildings in cities. We have pigeons and house sparrows and mourning doves and all kinds of, you know, urban birds that still have absolutely fascinating behaviors and life cycles that are just waiting to be noticed. So I think that's the other piece of slow birding that I'm still trying to work on, is to make sure that the approach is accessible for people in urban areas as well. And if you can't, if you're not mobile and you can't get out, how can we provide opportunities for people to do that a little bit more? I'm thinking about, you know, what's the walking route through my city that would be, or the bird walking, or, you know, even a route for someone in a wheelchair. If you're a wheelchair user, what kind of bird outing could I design for you that would take you through the city in a way to experience the birds there? So I think that's all there. We just need to shift our intention, right?
Sure. You know, it's interesting is I lived in Chicago before moving to Las Vegas, and I lived on Michigan Avenue, and bordering the street, there was a 3-story loft conversion where I lived. I lived on the ground floor, so I had a walkout porch. And then there was, on the west end, there were 3 or 4 townhomes, and on the north side of there were townhomes, and there was a parking lot in the middle. And being the morning coffee guy that I am, I would make my coffee and I'd go sit outside 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's dawning on me, I realized what was happening, but you brought it up when we went out for our excursion. There, where I lived, it was like Grand Central Station in the morning, with birds flying back and forth. And the one bird that I just adore, because I love the sound, is the cardinal.
Yeah.
And in the spring, the cardinal, I guess the word it would be harbinger, was the harbinger of spring for me. I knew spring was coming because all of a sudden I heard the cardinals in the morning. So when I was finally able to sit outside in the morning and just enjoy the cardinal, and now that you're talking about their behaviors, they showed up in the morning, they were gone in the afternoon, and then towards sunset, so they came back. And I think that's the one bird I miss being out here in Las Vegas is I don't get to hear the cardinal because there's just something special about that. But I love, 10 years after I moved into my condo, if we didn't exist, it would have been torn down and would have been a 24-story high rise. And so this is a unique little area because there's these huge trees that have, circled around the parking lot.
And you noticed, right, the daily routine of that bird because you gave yourself the space to do that. And I think in our busy lives, I hate that. I hate saying, "Oh, I'm so busy." No, okay. It's like the standard now, right? So we have very full lives. And I think we need these moments to slow down and connect and reconnect. And it's there, like the ability is there. It is deep within us. Like we are, right? We are of nature. We just have forgotten how to stay connected with it. And so I think you recognizing that coffee moment, and that's right, we just layer it on that. That's a routine for you. So how do we make that? Then we'll just add a little slow birding in there. And you've already got that with the cardinal. That was your usual suspect for that spot.
So I need to find some more new suspects out here in Las Vegas. I need to get up earlier and get out because I tend to, like on the weekends, I tend to come back home and, editing the podcast episodes to get them ready for production. And what I really need to do is just get out early, take advantage of it's cooler out. There's activity of feeding, and then come back in the afternoon and do the work. I am curious when someone finds you or they start to search for birds and they come across Bird Diva and they come across slow birding, when they visit your website, what are they going to find there? What's the actions that they're going to take as a result of discovering you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's what's wonderful now with the way technology is and what the pandemic has forced us to do in terms of being creative with how we reach out to people is that my reach can go beyond Vermont. And so some of the ways that people can get involved is, I think the easiest thing is to look at my calendar. If you're in Vermont, that's going to bring you to things that are local. And unfortunately, or fortunately, if you think about it, most of them are still online. But I'm actively offering online courses, just about one course a month. And I do a 4-week slow birding course. So you can check out online courses, and I've scaffolded things so that you could take an intro. And then once you take the intro, there are other layers that you can explore so you can go even deeper with that. So those are some of the things that you can look at on there. Of course, if you're traveling and coming to Vermont and you would like a bird guide who can take you to some spots around the state so you can explore some of the different species here and have it be in a more, like mindful, slower approach that's not, super intense or lofty in terms of bird connection, I'm happy to take you on a tour of some of the great places that we have here in Vermont, including to the top of Jay Peak. I mean, that was one of the things that we had planned to do during the Outdoor Writers Association conference originally when it was in the spring. We have wonderful high elevation species of birds that you can only get if you go up to the top of a mountain. And what's great about some of the ski areas here is they have gondolas and trams and things that will take you to the top. So you don't have to hike up. You can ride up and ride back down and experience the birds in that way. So that's really super fun.
I love that.
Yeah. And to learn more, there's resources on there and an explanation of what slow birding is. So you can see if that resonates with you as well.
Sure. Well, I have two product-y type questions. One is if I decide that I really want to learn more, is there a book or a video, YouTube, something that you would recommend that they should perhaps immerse themselves in to just to kind of get more knowledge about what it means to go out and discover birds. And
Yeah. Someday, Howard, I'm going to have a book of my own. I'm like, gosh, that was the whole reason for going to that outdoor writers conference. So fingers crossed, someday I will be able to say, get my book. But in the meantime, I think some great resources to start with so that you can get to know your usual suspects where you live is a basic field guide. And there are a number of different amazing field guides out there, from Sibley's Eastern Guide to Birds or Western Guide to Birds. And these are actual books. Of course, there are apps that are associated with them as well. A website that's really awesome is All About Birds, and that is run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology out of Ithaca, New York. That one is amazing. If you love apps, I cannot recommend any more highly than Merlin, which is it's an app that's run again by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It's free. It will help you break down how to look at a bird and put in these little things that you're observing about the bird, and then it will spit out a list for you of the possibilities. It also has a feature now that's like Shazam for birds, which is amazing, which is the thing everybody's been waiting for. Can I hold my phone up outside and say, get my phone to tell me what this bird is? And there's a feature on the app now that will do that. So that's really cool to be able to use an app in that way. I think it makes birding so much more accessible to so many people, because it takes away some of the hurdles to getting to learn how to use a field guide or getting to learn how to listen to birds, which I think once you use the app and you get hooked on it and you start asking all these different questions, or the app doesn't give you the right bird, then you do a deeper dive and maybe you come and take a course with me. But a good field guide, check out the All About Birds website, and then the Merlin Bird ID app that's free are great tools to start with.
well, I know I'm going to be loading the Merlin Bird ID app on my phone. So thank you for that. The second product-y kind of question is, if I want to go out and sit spot slow birding and just be in the moment, but I want a little closer view of the birds, what type of investment am I going to look at in binoculars? Or I know behind your shoulder there is the sight scope, and we're going to get a couple pictures that we're going to request. In fact, I'm going to request this right now. Bridget, I would love if you would share some photos of you at work and with the birds. I mean, there's some wonderful ones on the website, but just 4 or 6 that we can put up on our show notes. I would truly appreciate that. I know our guests would as well. However, if I was going to invest in a binocular scope, what are some of the things I should look out for, and what's a good entry into this new hobby of mine?
Yeah, and I think that's another one of the big barriers to participation in birding is people think that you have to have a pair of binoculars. You don't, right? And I'm going to give you the binocular thing for sure. So here, the most inexpensive way that you can really get into this and start to get closer looks at birds is to get a bird feeder. If you can get one in your yard, in your condo complex, right? I know people have to check that out and see if that's allowed, that type of thing. Or if you're in an urban setting, it might not be as easy. There are bird feeders that suction cup to the outside of your window. We have 2 of them at our house that I just love. So even if you're in an urban environment, you can suction cup one of these things to the outside of your window and drop some seed into that. And then the birds are coming really super close. So I think that's like the most affordable way to get a close-up view. The great thing about binoculars now is the technology has come so far that you can get a pair of binoculars for under $100 that are quality and that are not going to be frustrating to look through. So I do think you have to spend a little bit of money, but what's nice now is optics, the price of good optics for entry-level birders, novice birders are great. So you want to look for a couple of things. You want to look for something that is going to give you the magnification that you want. And there's two numbers typically when you look at a pair of binoculars, that it'll say like 8 and then an X or a multiplication sign. And then it's like 42 or 35 or something like that. So the 8 and the X go together. 8X is 8 times the power of what you can see with your naked eye. So birders typically get an 8X or a 10X. Know that if you get a 10X, the binocular is going to be a little bit bigger and just a little bit heavier because the lens, the optics have to be bigger and heavier in order to do that. The second number, the 42 or the 35, is the field of view. It's giving you an idea of how wide the field of view is going to be when you're looking through that. And that's important so that you can get on a bird easier. If you have a very narrow field of view, then you're going to be spending a lot of time kind of panning back and forth, especially to be able to see that view, the bird within the view that you're looking through. So most of the time, birders get an 8x42 or an 8x35. From my workshops, that was one of the things I invested in right away as a business owner. I wanted people to be able to come to any of my workshops or outings and not have to feel like they needed to get binoculars first. So I have 12 sets of Vortex binoculars. They are the Raptor series, and they're 8x35 and a half. So it gives you like a little bit more, but they're great. They're super lightweight. What I love about Vortex products is that they have a lifetime guarantee. So like I can back over my binoculars with my car and scrape up all the pieces and put them in a box and be like, you're not going to believe what happened to my binoculars. And they're going to be like, it's okay. We're going to hook you up and we're going to send you a new pair. They're also really great about repairs. So I can send them my stuff and they'll send it back to me. So full disclosure, I am sponsored by Vortex. And that's because I did my research and I really liked their product. And I've used a lot of different types of binoculars. Other brands that are great, Bushnell. I had a pair of Bushnell Legends when I first started. Loved those binoculars. I still use them. They're like my car binoculars, so that I have a pair in the house, a pair in my birding backpack, a pair in the car, just got binoculars everywhere. And then the other one that novice birders really like a lot are Nikon Monarchs, are another really good one. So try them out if you can, if you have a local birding festival or celebration that you can go to. If there's a birding hotspot, most birders are really friendly, although what's hard now in the pandemic is we can't always pass each other things that we're like putting up to our face and whatnot. But you can ask them questions and ask what they like about their binoculars or what brand they have and why they like them. So that's a great way to figure out what might be right for you.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing all of those resources, both the book and the apps and the websites and the binoculars thing. And, like any hobby, there is some admission criteria. Some of it is more costly than others, but from my perspective and what I'm hearing is I literally can, well, I'm not going to put up a bird feeder because I renting an apartment that's probably a no. I can't even have a dog. But I'm sure the bird feeder is out of the question, but I can walk outside and I mean, there's a courtyard and in a street. Kind of a weird area where I live, but there's birds everywhere and just go out and just listen to them. I love that. Yeah. I love that. Listen, Bridget, before we head out, I do want to make sure that we are able to invite people to your website and your social site. So where are the best places to get to know more about you and your work?
Yeah, so I'm at birddiva.com. That's pretty easy and straightforward. So you'll find all my classes and things like that there. And I'm pretty active on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook as well. As far as I know, I'm the only bird diva out there. So if you type bird diva in Facebook or bird diva in Insta in, you will be able to find me.
Fantastic. Well, Bridget, thank you so much for joining us on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. It's been a pleasure to learn more about you and your work. Thank you.
Howard, it was really fun to talk to you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Very good. Well, stay on the line. We're going to do a quick close and then we'll come back and chat. All right, folks, we have just been chatting with Bridget Butler, the Bird Diva. She is the owner of Bird Diva Consulting. And what a wonderful way to start the week, and and the opportunity just to embrace the great outdoors, but do it in a slow way. And I love this idea of slow birding and the idea that we can walk outside and just be mindful in the moment and stop and listen, put the cell phone in your pocket, at least for a little while, and just listen for what birds are in the area. And then you can go about discovering, what this bird is. And what I was going to say, what model of bird, that's probably a wrong thing to say, but okay, Bridget, you're on the line. What am I saying?
There we go. Species, like different species. Yeah, there you go.
All right. So Bridget is the biologist. I'm the psychology guy. So the species of bird that's out there, and it's just, an amazing thing that, right outside our doors is wonderful nature. And so really we learned a lot about Bridget, her background, and what really propelled her into this slow birding, sit spots, and really just this lifestyle, this mindset that now she is embracing and sharing that with others, even people like me, because I thoroughly enjoyed our outing up at the Outdoor Writers Association of America's conference in Jay Peak, Vermont. Listen, folks, if you'd like to learn more about Bridget and her work, do visit birddiva.com. And we will also provide the backlinks to her social sites, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Okay, if you enjoyed today's podcast, we would love to hear from you. You can visit us on the outdooradventureseries.com. We're also on Facebook and on LinkedIn, and we'll provide the backlinks to it as well. We're presently navigating the transition from the Outdoor Adventure Series being on Success Insight. It's now its own brand. So we're trying to get through that little navigation, but eventually we're going to, even on Facebook and LinkedIn, we'll have pages solely devoted to the Outdoor Adventure Series, as well as the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and especially Spotify, where we have the Outdoor Adventure Series playlist. Okay, folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there, have a phenomenal day, and we will see you on a future episode of the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Take care now.